It was wartime. I was 17 or something at the time, and not old enough to go into the armed services. And I had been sort of a class clown in school, as all guys with no confidence, these guys with hang-ups, and that's how you got attention. And I said, well, what am I going to do? So I said, like, get into some sort of show business. Well, the only show business there was radio in those days. So I sent auditions out, or letters, and I got hired. The funny thing is, I sent a letter to Ottawa. I said, I'm interested in getting radio, and somebody said, you got to start in a smaller community. Well, he sent me back a blistering letter saying that we're not a smaller community than Hamilton. So I wound up in Sault Ste. Marie, interesting, another steel town. Worked there a few months. I went to Chatham, and they kept coming home because of family and everything here, trying to get on CHML, which I eventually did in '45, and that became the long career.
Weren't you like the mayor or something?
The mayor of the morning, yeah.
Mayor of the morning. That's what it was.
That gave birth to one of the big jokes that's still going on with Vic Copps. It started. He, under his rule or office time, they took over a bunch of homes in McMaster, expropriated them because McMaster wanted to expand it. As a matter of fact, those homes are still there, sure, right near the hospital, and that caused an uproar. So I came up with the thing that I'm the mayor of the morning, and in Westdale, Vic Copps is the nightmare. So every mayor has used it after that. Since then, right? that little gag, yeah.
But when I came in, you were showing us the photographs.
Yeah.
And you started to talk a little bit about the Jewish Radio Hour.
Right.
I have never heard about the Jewish Radio Hour, so you must begin to talk a little bit about what.
Well, the Jewish, it was going on when I came. I came Sergeant Stewart in '45. The announcer was Vern Hill. Talk about deep voices. He was about 6 foot something tall. This picture's there. He was doing it. Then he left.
Jewish?
No, he wasn't. So I was the only Jewish announcer when I got hired. So they hired me, and that's how I made another $10 a week doing the Jewish Hour on Sunday morning. And of course, he made his money by buying the hour from Ken Sobel, the radio station. Then he'd resell it. Every song had a sponsor. So for Crown Bread or whatnot, I forget who the sponsors were, but they're all these Jewish businesses. They
don't have that at the station anymore, do they?
No.
That is to say, if one wanted to listen to this.
No. Where it continued, it's interesting, it continued when TV came in as a survival tactic. Our station started to produce a lot of foreign language programs. The Jewish Hours had already been established, and there was every night at 8 o'clock there was an Italian hour because there was a huge Italian population. Then there was once a week there was a Dutch hour, then there was a Scottish hour, and there was a German half hour. So that's how they made money from past prime time, like 6 o'clock at night, which had gone to television.
Can you just talk about what was on the Jewish Hour, including the advertisers?
Well, I can only remember Crown Bread because of the commercial, Crown Bread. But he also made money at 10:30. That's when we announced the funerals. So the joke was, you listen to the Jewish Hour, and if you don't hear your name, it's okay to get up. And then the unveilings,
This was what, Sunday morning?
Sunday morning, 10 to 11. And we had a big audience in Toronto.
Now, what'd you do? Like play
there was, whatever was available. It was first in the early times there was only cantorial and the old songs like Romania, those and Maurice Schwartz with his comedy, and the cantorials. They were always great. And then Israeli music came in, so that became part of the picture with Israeli music, and they would sell.
Sure. Now everyone in the city, the Jewish community obviously listened to this.
So did in Toronto. Toronto, our biggest listening artist was Toronto because they got it easily, and all the sponsors as commercials were Toronto sponsors. They would advertise. The funny thing is that these guys were from the tail end of Yiddish art theater. These guys actually thought they were artists, and this was just a way to make a living, but they like to produce shows and bring in talent and do plays and all that. So that was, He was involved with that.
Isn't that interesting? No.
And the funny thing is you don't see that. He wouldn't let his other profile because he had cancer of the bone, and it took him about 10 to 15 years before he
Who's
passed
this other
on.
guy that you're pointing to?
Harry Harris.
Harry
He was the
Harris.
producer of the hour.
I see.
And his wife would come over and his daughter, and they'd be in the control room to produce the show. He'd
Is
bring
that
the,
right?
the script over. But and there were a lot of non-Jewish listeners who liked the music. You know, on Sunday morning, that everywhere else it was just church and religious service.
It's true. It's
As
true.
a matter of fact, the guy who's doing CHML Morning Show now, Bob Bertina, he grew up in that. He knew more about he liked the Kleischer music and
course.
clarinet, and he told me more about the Jewish hour than I remembered
Is that right?
because he used to love the music. Well, being of an ethnic basis himself, I think
Sure.
he's Croatian or
Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah, he's been around for a couple of years.
Well, yeah, not too. He's 55, maybe
that it?
getting close to 60. Yeah.
Here's something that I thought you would be especially helpful to help us understand. There must have been a period in this community's history when people would describe it as, the really happening time. I mean, this community, maybe in the 50s, maybe in the 40s, it must have been a very vibrant community,
Well,
no?
I think one of the, like my sister mentioned that in her memories, one of the Jewish Community Center when it was on John Street probably was the meeting place at the time. It was, as you say, in the 50s. War was over. People are meeting. They're dating. They're
Really? When would
mating.
you go there? Like in the evenings?
There would be, on the weekends. I remember Abby and Shiki Stein walking in there wearing their breeches and because they liked the horseback ride, and we'd be looking up at the rich people. Look at they ride horses. My generation, or from my side, and they drove horses with like the Waxman brothers, their father.
Right.
Isaac Waxman, he was about this tall, and it was great fun to see him coming into the junkyards up Cannon Street. He'd be standing like a charioteer
Really?
on his feet with a horse, getting the horse.
So you remember when the horses were actually
Yeah,
ridden?
were driven.
Driven
The
with
Sheenies, they used to call it.
These were the ones who were doing that.
And the Jewish Community Center, it had all sorts of activities. And what else was there? And then they'd have things for kids to do.
Well, talk a little bit, Paul, if you can remember what those activities were. When you say it had all sorts of activities.
Well, they'd have for kids. I remember even before the one on John Street, the one on Vine Street, we had a summer camp there when we were
Really?
kids. Yeah. And we would go there and we'd do the painting on glass, all that arts and crafts
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So the Vine Street, which that became with a funeral home later on. And our Talmud Torah was just down the street, our Jewish school.
Did you go there?
Yeah. After school, you wonder, you went to school for the regular hours, and then every night you'd go to a cheder.
How many days a week would you go there? Do you remember?
You'd go 3 nights a week plus Sunday. You'd have classes
Really?
Sundays. Yeah.
What'd you study?
We studied how to read Hebrew and Yiddish also. They would have the Yiddish.
Oh, really?
They'd read the Yiddish stories, and we'd learn Yiddish and how to pray and all that sort of stuff.
Really?
So it was a regular school program.
And I guess you also learned how to respond when your ear was being pulled.
Oh yeah.
You got to be.
He'd be sitting up there, Rabbi Katz. We remember him. He'd be sitting up there eating his pumpernickel bread sandwiches while we were doing our work, and of course he'd come down and give you a knip on the ear if you weren't.
Where was he from? Was he from Hamilton or
I don't know.
was he an import?
We got a picture here somewhere of the picnic of the whole Hebrew. Of course, that doesn't help for your.
Who was in
Actually,
your class? Do you remember
We
who?
want
You've seen
that
it.
picture. We need that picture.
I don't know if it's Morris Waxman gave me. It's got a picture of the whole class in Dundurn Park. All of us.
We've heard about that picture. Chuck Matchin mentioned it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
He was in your class?
Wow, I remember Chester Waxman of Bad Publicity these days. He was a mean guy in those days. I remember him having me up against the wall and punching my stomach just to prove he was tougher.
Really?
Well, this is playground tactics in school.
Sure.
Can I just interject? What does sheeny mean? I know you.
Sheeny is a derogative term
For?
for a junk man.
Oh, for a junk man.
For a junk man who Sheeny, here comes the Sheeny. Even Helen used to say it in Toronto. She didn't know. She'd heard the kids
Was
say,
it just Jewish junk man, or was it just junk man?
Well, who else was? Yeah,
It was.
it'd be interesting.
Kike.
Kike was Sheeny.
Yeah.
Well, we had one guy. It was funny. His father, Cayman, he became the Bargain Herald's. Cayman, they had a variety store on York Street, and he became the huge chain of bargain stores, Bargain Heralds. And and his father used to be called Kapayaya, because he was a junk man, and his cry would be copper wire. It came out Kapayaya, so that's how he had the name. He was Kapayaya. That was his name. We had a lot of characters, Jewish characters. Oh yeah.
Who?
Well, the Furrier, Poulter, wheeling and dealing. These guys used to sit in the delicatessen, and they'd try to put deals over on each other.
Which deli?
Boleslavsky's. There was 3 delis.
Really?
There's Boleslavsky's was the deli. There was,
Where was it? Just
on York Street. York Street. Farther up was the Zuckers, had a delicatessen, and then Bill Cohn took that one over. And in between was Mrs. Platt, had a delicatessen. And her son was a Tavel, she said, which means a little devil. He became a photographer and a producer for National Geographic, went all over the world making things for the National Geographic. Yeah, these you never expected, what kids would turn out with.
Exactly.
But the JCC, getting back to that, the thing that really was we ran a variety show once a year. So all the young Jewish people we'd be doing dances and songs and skits, and the whole city would turn out for it because, take over a Westdale Theater, and
really?
They'd have the guy who directed them for the longest time was Leo Romberg. Leo Romberg was a partner with Sam Lewis and Hamilton Store Fixtures, who's well over 90 now. And he did these in Toronto, and he was a very good director. We produced very good shows.
But you didn't produce them in Toronto, right?
No, just for Hamilton, yeah.
Here.
It was
so the Furrier was a character.
The Furrier, that was Mickey Bogart's father. He was the Furrier. What the hell was it?
Wait, Mickey Bogart
was Paul Bogart's. She's in the hospital right now, I think.
Oh, is she in the hospital?
Yeah, she's not well. And her sister has got a touch of cancer too. Bornstein, that was their name, Bornstein. Poulter was also a bit of a furrier, but he dealt in sheepskin gloves and whatnot. I think his big deal was he thought he made a real big deal, and he wound up with a whole car full of left-handed gloves.
Is that right?
That was Shakespeare. He was the furrier. Shakespeare, they called him. He was the Bornstein's father, and his shtick with
the money.
Yeah, jingling the money all the time.
That's right.
And who else? Well, of course, the Boleslavskys, the delicatessen was the hangout. Chuck Manchin has, I don't have the stories, but a lot of the great stories, how these guys came in and try to top one another, these fellas.
Sure.
And on that street also, the Katz family had the Hamilton Auto Parts, which was these, and then the big, them and Norm Rosenblad's father. He had Murray Auto Parts, I guess, and they gave employment to half the Jewish young guys in town.
Norm Rosenblad's father.
Father, yeah, he was.
He didn't have furniture.
That's another Rosenblatt. That's the Rosenblatts, I think, had the furniture. Okay. Rosenblad was one of our real entrepreneurs and wealthy fellows, but also, unfortunately, a heavy drinker, which kind of got him in the end. But he had a home out in Mayfair Crescent too, right? That's when Norm took Deborah. Norm bought Deborah's house. Deborah, your
Moses.
Yeah, the one, the architectural splendor. Right. Yeah, Norm moved into that one. His father lived next door. But Murray Auto Parts. But there were a lot of young guys got their starts there because it was tough for a Jewish guy to get a job anywhere.
It was tough, and one of the things that made it a little tough was anti-Semitism.
Oh, I got a job during wartime in the summer working for a Steel Company of Canada, and the guys would say, "What are you doing here? You're Jewish. You should be in business."
Of course.
You got plenty of that.
That was the stereotype. But do you remember anti-Semitism?
Oh yeah.
I mean, aside from going to the Steel Company, but do you remember
Well, when Helen and I got married, we found a really ideal apartment right near Scott Park, and we came back to make our deposit. They said, I can't rent to you. We found out you're Jewish, and the people here would be very unhappy. So we got our apartment just around the corner through Seymour Rosenfeld's father. They owned right at Queen and Bold, so we're not far. We're spending our last years from where we started, just up around the corner.
But when you grow up in the city, I presume there aren't many Jews working in banks.
I guess Les Lasky was the only one, and he graduated from that to the only one that I know of. Well, now there are some women, like Chuck Matchen's daughter has got a very good job in banking with the Royal Bank, I think, in Toronto, head office.
That's today.
Yeah, oh yeah, but no way were you going.
40s.
That's why they created all the businesses they did. You couldn't get a job, so you had to find a way to do it yourself. That's where the whole salvage business started, from the Jewish people. You got to do something for a living, so they created. My father used to stand on the market, farmers market. Yeah.
What did he sell?
Whatever was going that day. He would go out there about 3 in the morning, buy all the stuff, and stand on the market. He and my mother and their lady.
Is that right?
And he had no car or truck. That's why he lived also just on George Street down here, because he'd pull his little wagon with his tabletop down to the market, set up.
Were there any other Jews besides your
Yeah,
parents?
they'd be yelling at each other. Stiglick family run the market. They were big operators. Who else? Well, there was a lot of anti-Semitism there,
Really?
from other stallholders. Jews have the right idea and that sort of stuff. My brother Max was on the market. Where in the hell is this picture? He was Max the Potato Man.
Mm-hmm.
I was visiting an art gallery here, and I saw his picture. Somebody had been in the market and painted his picture of Max, and I gave it to his daughter. But we've got a photo of the thing somewhere. So yeah, there were a few of us on the market.
Aside from the market and aside from the salvage kind of business, there were other kinds of stores.
Well, they had menswear. They had menswear stores. Or most of the menswear stores were operated by Jewish guys. On York Street, there was Lee's. They had 2, and we always remembered, because came Yontif, that's when your mother took you in to buy the new hat, the cloth cap, and the breeches and the new pants. My sister Rose, who I talked about, she worked for Firth Brothers. They were the huge clothing manufacturing, and she worked there. And I remember her. She bought me my bar mitzvah suit.
Really? Here in Hamilton?
Yeah, a scratchy woolen thing.
Of course.
All. And our bar mitzvah, I guess, was on Cannon Street. It no longer exists, the synagogue there.
What is it today? The Addis?
Yeah, that was the Addis. Yeah, of course, they're out in Westville, but that's where they were on Cannon Street.
That's where you had your bar mitzvah?
Yeah, and they threw the peanuts and candies at you from the...
Is that right?
And the bar mitzvah meal was a honey cake and a glass of wine or whiskey or something.
What about the meatballs?
There's no, you didn't have that. Who could afford that? Could afford, yeah.
But your bar mitzvah wasn't in the 50s.
No, I was 13. I was in the 30s something. Yeah, I was born 1926. It would be 39 in the beginning of the war.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
My aunt, Mrs. Perlman, she was the town caterer.
Oh, really?
And she was a single mother because her husband deserted her. And she was a great cook, but the way they catered, as long as there was roast chicken and potatoes and kishka, that's all you needed.
Where would they have that?
At the synagogue, at the halls of the down below.
Synagogue.
Yeah, they had banquet rooms or halls, whatever they were.
Do you remember any of these banquets?
I remember that we had formed our own club, a group of us called the YSI, Young Sons of Israel, and we had dances down below, teenage dances. I had a record from my same sister. He had a wind-up Victrola. So I would bring that down, we'd wind it up and put on the Glenn Miller records and dance. I always remember my wife, who was not my girlfriend there, I think I asked her to dance with one of the longest songs that Glenn Miller ever produced. The thing went on and on, and I was more interested in finding some dancing away with, when is this? I think it was Elmer's tune or something. It kept going on and on. But we had dances, and then we had meetings at the Jewish Center that was on Vine Street then. We had a little club, and we had speakers come down to speak to us, and we'd also have little affairs there where we'd...
and what was it called?
Young Sons of Israel. Murray Hoffman, he was an organizer. He was one of the Hoffmans. He always had to organize something, a Tefillin Club, or
There was
Young
a Tefillin
Sons.
Club?
Yeah, we had a Tefillin Club.
Who had a Tefillin Club? You guys had
Yeah, he organized a Tefillin Club. We went to, Cannon Street Shul. We davened.
Who was the rabbi at that time? Do you remember?
There was not itinerant. I think it's also a misbook of yours, Rabbi Levine.
I've heard the name.
The chief rabbi of Hamilton.
Chief rabbi, and also he was in business. He had barrels and whatnot, and salvage material. He was never had a note to work on, and I also remember him. He'd be up speaking. Also, you knew her for another 5 minutes. Also, I always remember him.
That was which was the shul? Was the Cannon Street?
No, Beth Jacob. No, first of all, it was the Deutsche Schule. That was the Reform. Right. And the Beth Jacob was on 100th Street near the railway, which has a beautiful little shul. And then there was, we were the Polische, the Cannon Street. And then there was Ferguson Avenue down.
Right.
And there was Hess Street, where my father eventually moved because he got mad at the people at Addis Israel, and he moved to Hess Street.
Why was he angry at the people?
Who knows? It's easy to get angry at when you're in the shul business. He was one of the founders of Addis Israel. There's a tablet of the current Addis that has in Hebrew all the founding members, and his name is on there. Probably had to contribute $10 or something of hard-earned money, but he got mad at him, and we went there to Hess Street, which wasn't bad because we just lived up the street.
Could you name 3 people besides yourself who were in the Tefillin Club?
Well, there was Murray Hoffman, the leader. There was myself. There was Norm Rainwasser. Norm Rain.
Wait,
he was our secretary.
What's his name?
Norm. His real name was Rainwasser. He's Norm Rain now. He lives in Dundas.
He's my neighbor.
Yeah, in Dundas. You should talk to him. He'll give you great memories of because he loves to talk.
Really?
He goes to Chicotwa. What's the?
Yeah.
He goes. He lives there practically all year round because he's a hero there, and he loves the lectures and all that. He loves that life. Yeah.
Yes, I remember he once
talked about.
Yeah, I remember I had correspondence with him about Chautauqua.
Yeah, and also he's a painter, but
I know he called me and my kids into his house once to show us. So he was part of this film.
He was part of all these group who lived all around York Street. Al Boxenbaum, Ziggy Boxenbaum's dead now. Ziggy, forget Ziggy's last name.
I'll bet you that Beth Jacob never had a Tefillin Club.
I don't know if they had a young people. Well, this was really because of that same group, the YSI. And he organized us for all these activities. But the shuls are interesting there. The biggest thing when you're a young person in those days was you'd go from shul to shul, walking, looking for the girls and vice versa. It was a nice thing. You'd be all dressed up in your new clothes. You'd start off at Cannon and to Hunter Street and then to the Anshe Sholem. So I always remember that.